Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. So those of you who have been following my channel recently will know that I've been reviewing every Harry Potter video game. We looked at the PS1 Potter games, as well as the 6th generation console versions. Last time out I reviewed the spin-off game, Quidditch World Cup. Prior to that I reviewed the previous mainline games in the Potter series. Today we're going to be looking at Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Released in 2004, developed by Kryptonite Games. This is going to be for the Xbox version. Once again, I also own the PS2 version, and that version is practically identical, with the only major difference that I can tell being that the Xbox version has slightly better graphics. This is amplified by the fact that it's backwards compatible with the Xbox 360, and can be played in HD. So I remember very clearly when this game came out, and I was fascinated by it. While all the Harry Potter games before this one were very good games in their own right, and I enjoyed them thoroughly, this one was the first game in the series that at the time of its release truly felt like a genuine AAA title to me. It has pretty much the exact same style and gameplay formula of the previous two, and it basically took everything that worked about those games and refined and improved on them, rather than make any drastic changes. Playing the game in retrospect all these years later, I was really curious to see whether or not the game holds up, because like I said, at the time of this game's release I rated it very highly and it exceeded my expectations. And I'm happy to say that even now in 2022 this game is still fantastic in my opinion. And as far as I'm concerned, despite a few minor nitpicks which we'll talk about later in the video, this is where the Harry Potter series peaked. So let's talk about it. So just like the previous games in the mainline Harry Potter series, the game is an open world, third-person action-adventure RPG, based on the third Harry Potter book and movie. Just like the other games in the series, it follows the events of the source material very loosely, with plenty of original ideas and concepts thrown in there. One of the things that sets this game apart from the other games in the Potter series is the fact that this time, in addition to playing as Harry, you can also play as his two best friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, with the ability to play as all three. The game makes the most of this feature by having each character feel very different from one another, with certain spells that can only be obtained by one character, and certain inherent abilities that only one character possesses. Unlike the previous games, which in some ways were quite simplistic, this game has more of an emphasis on puzzle solving and teamwork. In the beginning of the game you get a short tutorial that takes place aboard the Hogwarts Express. Scabbers the rat gets chased outside the cabin by Hermione's cat Crookshanks, and Harry and Ron will have to track him down together.
I think Scabbers went that way.
This gives you an introduction into the game's overall controls and gameplay mechanics, as you traverse the train, looking for Scabbers, removing obstacles in your way. You also come across Malfoy with his two minions Crabbe and Goyle.
Well, look who it is. Potty and the Weasel. I should have known this pathetic excuse for a rat had something to do with you.
You'd think Malfoy and his goons would have learned after all the absolute beatings they took from Harry in the previous games not to mess with him this time, but I digress. You get a short, easy boss battle against them where you basically bitch slap them with minimal effort. Get used to this by the way, because Malfoy and his goons are gluttons for punishment and they will be back for more. After kicking Malfoy's ass, the train then comes under attack from a Dementor, just like in the movie. Harry passes out and Ron will have to drag Harry away from the Dementor, while trying to avoid its attacks. The Dementors add sort of a survival horror aspect to the game, and they are quite creepy and well designed. You come across quite a few of them throughout the game and they show up from time to time. Once the tutorial is over and the Dementor is defeated, you arrive at Hogwarts and that's where the game really begins. The game's quirky, satirical tone is put on full display in the very first interaction.
Come on, show me the Folio Brutae. We're not going anywhere until you've shown me the Folio Brutae.
So yeah, the first thing that happens at Hogwarts is Ron literally holds Harry hostage in the dormitory and refuses to let Harry leave until he shows him the Folio Brutae. which is a book of all the creatures featured in the game. You start out with only one page and can find the rest of them scattered around the game. Shortly after this you get more of an introduction into the game's combat. As I mentioned before, the game is an open world RPG. Just like the previous games, you get a huge sandbox style game to explore. You can explore the castle with loads of interesting secrets and oddities to find, as well as collectibles to obtain, and NPCs to talk to.
Are you collecting Bertie Bott's beans? I hear you can spend them in Fred and George Weasley's shop.
Leave off. I don't want to be seen with you Gryffindors.
The game feels so much more alive and varied than the previous two. There are always interesting characters lurking around, and they all have some pretty funny and interesting things to say.
I know these suits of armour can't see me, but they still give me the creeps.
Adding to this is the fact that the vast majority of the time you won't be alone. You can switch between Harry, Ron and Hermione at any time during gameplay, and while traversing the castle, they will often talk to each other and make comments and remarks about the events of the game.
Then potions, and I really can't afford to waste any more time.
Again, this helps to make the castle feel more alive and adds to the overall immersion of the game. I mentioned before that each character has their own inherent ability. For example, Harry is more agile and nimble than the other two, and can engage in platforming. Harry can climb up ropes to reach high up areas, and can jump from one ledge to another. The platforming mechanics are very similar to the previous Harry Potter games, but they feel a bit more refined and varied here. Ron has the ability to perceive certain things, he can search in bookcases and has a nose for finding collectibles. He can also find and unlock secret areas that will be invisible to the other two. This is necessary to find certain collectibles and to progress through certain challenge areas. Hermione is smaller and thinner than the other two, and can squeeze through tight openings, allowing her to access certain areas that will be locked off to the other two. What I love about this feature is that several of the puzzle solving sections of the game require teamwork, as each playable character will need to use their inherent abilities to complete them. I also mentioned that there are several different spells to learn in the game, and this time some of them are unique to particular characters. Just like all the Harry Potter games, you start the game off with Flipendo, the knockback jinx. This constitutes the vast majority of the game's combat. Simply cast Flipendo at an enemy to take them out. You also unlock Expelliarmus near the beginning of the game. It creates a shield that can deflect offensive spells back at enemies. The rest of the spells are learned by finding the relevant spellbook, either during a lesson or while traversing the game. For example, Hermione can learn Glacius. This basically shoots ice at various targets. This can be used to freeze things such as enemies, water to create bridges, as well as putting out fires. It can also be used to turn puddles into ice blocks that can be used in puzzle solving. She can also learn Reparo, which repairs things. There are various uses for this spell, such as fixing boxes for platforming and puzzle solving. She can also learn Draconiphores that animate certain dragon statues that generate flames. There are various uses for this, such as burning tapestries to reveal secret passages and collectibles. She can also learn Snufflephores that can be purchased from Fred and George's shop. This spell is used to turn those annoying books that attack you into mice, leading to them finding collectibles for you. This is really fun to do. Harry can learn Carpe Retractum, which allows him to grab things from a distance. The game has many uses for this, such as fishing, pulling and activating levers, and even assisting Harry with platforming, being used to both extend certain bridges and pull Harry from one ledge to another. It can also be used to grab and disarm enemies, taking their shields off them during combat. Late in the game, Harry can also learn Expecto Patronum, which can be used to ward off Dementors. This is obtained during a terrifying level where Harry is being stalked by a Dementor while trying to figure out a platforming puzzle. What I really like about this is that in the early part of the game, the Dementors are seen as unstoppable terrors that you can't defeat, and you have to survive and run away from them. Once you learn Expecto Patronum, you feel liberated in a sense. You can now fight and defeat the Dementors, which is awesome. As for Ron, he only learns one unique spell in the game, which is Lumos. This is used to light up dark areas, as well as to shine a light on certain mirrors and reflective balls. This is used in several of the game's puzzle sections. Lumos can also be used in combat against probably the most annoying enemy in the game, the Hinky Punks. Seriously, those things are an absolute pain in the ass. You have to shine Lumos on them until they become vulnerable, then you can take them out with Flipendo if you're quick. But the problem is that this doesn't always work, and fighting these enemies can be quite glitchy and weird. So that pretty much sums up the game's unlockable spells. Just like in the previous games, each spell learning lesson will contain a challenge area that you will have to complete in order to obtain the spellbook. These challenge areas have been significantly improved from the last game, and they are considerably more interesting and more well designed than before. They will be filled with enemies that must be defeated, as well as puzzles to complete. Each of the puzzles will be pretty unique, and several of them involve using particular spells to complete them. At the end of each challenge level you will get a boss battle. Unlike in the Chamber of Secrets game where these boss battles were all the same, in this game each boss battle at the end of these levels is entirely unique, and you will have to use the spell you just unlocked in the level to defeat them. For example, a giant flaming cauldron that can only be defeated by freezing it with Glacius and smashing its limbs, or a giant statue that must be taken apart bit by bit using Carpe Retractum, and a ghoul that can only be defeated by shining Lumos at it and forcing it into a trap. Like I said before, these boss battles are very unique and relevant to the spell you just unlocked. Speaking of boss battles, as I mentioned before, you fight Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle at various points in the game. In addition to the spell learning lessons, you also once again have to attend potions class with Professor Snape at various stages of the game. Thankfully this time they fixed Snape's character model and he no longer looks like Lord Farquaad.
I do find Sirius Black's miraculous escape from the roof somewhat intriguing. Don't you?
Just like in the Philosopher's Stone game, Snape will task you with finding and obtaining various potion ingredients for your next lesson. These ingredients can once again be found by exploring the grounds and performing various tasks. Some of them will be guarded by certain hazards such as venomous tentaculars or doxies. Some of the spells learned during the game will also be necessary to obtain these ingredients. You can find some hints on how to obtain these by speaking to Hagrid.
Oh, flying seahorses. Oh, they're right tricky. Go over to the boathouse by the lake for them. But you'll have to pull them out of the water with something.
Speaking of Hagrid, well, yeah, he's very different in this game.
Sorry, I'm just so worried. What do you want to ask me?
This is not the classic jolly, carefree, negligent PS1 Hagrid of old. In this game, well, just listen.
It's no use. Beaky's gonna be executed at sunset. I couldn't help him.
Oh, Hagrid, what can we do?
There's nothing you can do. The time's set and that's it. They just run along and turn in. I gotta go and make Beaky comfortable.
I mean, Hagrid in this game is just depressed. He's just so sad the whole game, it's heartbreaking.
And the worst thing about those devils on that disposal committee, Lucius Malfoy has got him in his pocket.
Beaky doesn't stand a chance. I don't know what to do. Honest, I don't.
There are 3 different potions in the game. The Wiggenweld potion that gives you full health, the antidote to common poisons that cures you when you've been poisoned by doxies, and the girding potion which can only be obtained very late in the game, and this increases your maximum health. Once these potions have been brewed, you can obtain them in various areas of the game. You can also administer these potions to your companions during combat if need be. The game has plenty of enemy variety. For example, you take on those annoying flying books, the Monster Book of Monsters that pops up in various areas of the game, Cornish Pixies, Redcaps who throw stink pellets at you, Hinky Punks. As I mentioned before, they're probably the most annoying and glitchy enemy in the entire game, Doxies who poison you, Salamanders, some of which will be flaming and you will need to use Glacius to defeat them, Dementors, various charmed muggle objects such as musical instruments, toys, rubber ducks and robots. I guess these students of Hogwarts were trying to figure out the function of a rubber duck. Plenty of different enemies to fight throughout the game. This of course adds to the overall variety of the game. As I mentioned before, the combat of the game is quite varied too. I mentioned in my reviews for the previous games that you can explore the castle and the grounds at various different times of the day. In this game, in addition to that, you can also explore during different seasons. The game of course takes place over the course of Harry's entire school year, and each stage of the game covers a different season. What's cool about this too is that when exploring the grounds, your companions will often comment on the weather. Again, just doing its bit to make the game feel more alive. In the previous games, Harry would unlock a broomstick and you would be able to use it to fly around the grounds, to explore the rooftops of Hogwarts. In this game they removed the broomstick entirely. Fortunately though, they replaced it with something even better. Instead of flying around on a broomstick, you can now ride Buckbeak the hippogriff, and this is amazing and really fun to do. Yeah, I'd personally take Buckbeak over a broomstick any day of the week, but I digress. You can do this in various different seasons and it looks really incredible. For some reason though, it's only Harry and Hermione who can ride Buckbeak. Try to ride him with Ron and he will assault you. I guess Buckbeak doesn't like gingers. Flying Buckbeak is probably one of my favourite features in the entire game and I had a real blast with it. He's introduced during the Care of Magical Creatures class with Hagrid where you get a short minigame to collect a certain amount of bats in a time limit. Speaking of minigames, this game has a ton of challenges and side activities to take part in. For example, the game brings back wizard duels. Unlike the previous games where these duels were one-on-one, in this game you have a team of 3. You can access the dueling club that has been set up in the Great Hall and take on the other house teams. If one or more of the main characters isn't currently in your party, then they will be replaced by another Gryffindor student. Interestingly, you can actually access the dueling club in the main menu, and you can play as the other Hogwarts houses, including Slytherin, so yes, you can play as Malfoy and his goons. This is a fun feature, and it's fun to play as the other houses. Another pretty cool minigame is Owl Racing. Here you get to play as Hedwig, where you can fly around the grounds and race against some of the other owls. This is quite challenging, but not too hard. Once again, this can also be accessed from the main menu, and you can replay it at any time. The game has several stealth sections. Just like in the previous games, at night time, certain sections of the castle will be restricted, and there will be prefects as well as teachers controlling the corridors. You will often have to sneak past them. Snape in particular does these patrols. You also have enchanted suits of armour that you will have to avoid while sneaking. In certain sections of the game, you will have to sneak past trolls, and you can use dung bombs to distract them. It's a fun stealth mechanic and it helps to add some variety to the game. The game has plenty of interesting collectibles. First of all, you have Bertie Bott's beans that can be found scattered around the game. You can find these by shooting certain items in the environment, or by searching in bookcases as Ron. Just like in the previous games, these act as currency that can be spent in Fred and George's shop. Once again, Fred and George have set up a shop in a disused bathroom.
Feel free to come by any time. We're sure to have something of interest.
For some reason, the bathroom is no longer in the Gryffindor common room on the 7th floor, and is now instead on the 6th floor. Here you have several interesting items to buy, such as rare wizard cards, stink pellets which serve several functions in the game, as well as dung bombs that I mentioned before can be used to distract trolls. You can also buy potions here to add to your inventory. In addition to these items, each playable character will even have their own unique items for sale. For example, I mentioned earlier that Hermione can purchase the Snuffly Force spellbook. She can also examine writings that increase spellcasting power, but to obtain these items she will have to first complete a task for Fred and George. Find all the statues hidden around Hogwarts, and they will allow her to read the text. This increases the spell power of your entire party, and gives you a huge advantage in combat. Likewise, Ron has his own challenge. Find all these bells around Hogwarts and throw a stink pellet at them, and Fred and George will give Ron some unique collectibles. These are fun little challenges and I really enjoyed them. You also once again have many wizard cards to find hidden throughout the game. You can find these by searching the castle and completing certain challenges. Many of them will be locked off to you until you obtain the relevant spell needed to unlock them. Once again, by finding a full set you can increase your maximum health. This gives you an incentive to find them all by exploring as much as possible and finding all the secret areas and passages. I mentioned earlier that you can also find the pages of the Folio Bruti. In addition to these collectibles, you can also once again visit the notice board in the Gryffindor common room. Here you can be tasked to find lost items for certain NPCs that are looking for them. Find the items hidden around the castle and the grounds, and return them to the common room in exchange for house points. Bringing these back of course can help you win the house cup at the end of the game. So in addition to the main story, there are plenty of fun challenges and side activities to take part in, as well as general exploration and role-playing. Speaking of role-playing, it's really fun to just explore the castle and talk to various NPCs.
Careful, Potter, there's a Dementor behind you.
They always have interesting things to say and some of the dialogue is very funny.
That Draco Malfoy really gets on my nerves.
Also, I swear Crabbe and Goyle have gotten dumber and dumber since last year. The story and voice acting is pretty good too, although the finale of the game feels a bit rushed. The game does have a few problems though, nothing major, but just a few minor nitpicks. First of all, I mentioned how your companions will often talk to each other and comment on the events of the game. This is great, but the problem is that at certain points of the game, your list of objectives will be completed, and in order to move the story along and move on to the next day, you will have to turn in. Although with this game having so many secrets and collectibles, you would presumably want to explore the castle and have fun, right? Well, sadly, while trying to do this, your companions just won't shut up.
Can we get a move on, please?
Anyway, I'm tired. I don't know what to do. I think it's time to turn in.
They will just constantly bitch and moan, telling you to turn in, over and over and over again. This gets really annoying after a while. I mean, even Neville gets involved at one point.
Can we go back now? Please? Can't we go back to the common room now? I just want to go to bed. Can we go now?
Seriously, this gets very annoying.
Let's go outside.
Well, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, me too. I think we should turn in.
It's as if the game is actively trying to discourage exploration. I mean, come on, man. It's not a huge negative, but it's just one of those nitpicks I have with the game. As I mentioned before, the finale of the game feels very rushed to me. Not only that, but one of the things I think that the game lacks, and what would have made it a better climax, is an epic final boss battle. As I mentioned before, the game does have some pretty good boss battles, and I very much enjoyed them, but not one at the end of the game. And no, I don't count the fight at the end with the swarms of Dementors, because you fight several Dementors throughout the game. What would have made sense, in my opinion, would be a boss battle against Professor Lupin as a werewolf. Lupin is in the game and he turns into a werewolf in a cutscene, so I think a boss battle would have made sense. Again, this isn't a huge negative, but it's just something that the other Harry Potter games had, and I think it would have been a better way to end the finale. So all in all, this game is pretty epic, and in my opinion this is the best game in the Harry Potter series. It's certainly my personal favourite. It's not perfect, but it's about as good a Harry Potter experience as you can get. I give The Prisoner of Azkaban a solid 9 out of 10. Without those small nitpicks, it could have been a perfect 10. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for my next review where we're going to be looking at the sequel, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, as well as many more retrospective video game reviews. Thanks for watching and God bless.